After a years-long campaign to repatriate sacred cultural items, First Nations of Canada experienced a moment of long-awaited relief. More than 60 sacred cultural items were returned from the Vatican last week. First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepinuk said, "We've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go." But this raises an important question. Why did the Vatican have these artifacts in the first place? Let's talk about it. The relationship between the Catholic Church and Indigenous peoples of North America can be defined by violence, displacement, and forced assimilation. Across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, Indigenous peoples were targeted by missionaries and governments who worked together to erase Indigenous cultures and identities. In 1920, Pope Pius XI called on missions around the world to donate cultural objects, including Indigenous belongings, for what would become the 1925 Vatican Mission Exposition. The exhibition was funded by Pope Pius XI and organized with the cooperation of the city of Rome and Italy's fascist dictator Benito Mussolini. More than 100,000 artifacts were displayed, and these materials were displayed as conquests of the Church, a continuation of Roman triumphal culture, where power is demonstrated through domination and display. And this practice goes back for generations. During the Renaissance, the Roman Empire paraded captives from the so-called New World through the streets of Rome, a practice anthropologists describe as the trophying of human otherness. This same colonial logic later gave rise to living zoos, where Indigenous people were publicly displayed, a practice that continued well into the 20th century. Now, when it comes to the artifacts themselves, the Church insists they were gifted, but historical records tell a different story. Many of these cultural objects were taken during a time when Indigenous peoples were criminalized for practicing their own traditions. Ceremonies that included traditional gift-giving were banned, and items were routinely seized by missionaries during the enforcement of these laws. The Vatican Mission Exposition ran for 13 months and drew nearly 1 million visitors, and after it ended, the items were placed in storage and remained there for decades. Momentum for the return increased when Pope Francis met with Indigenous leaders in 2022, when they traveled to the Vatican to receive his apology for the Church's role in operating Canada's residential school system. During that visit, leaders were shown objects from the collection, including a rare Inuit kayak, wampum belts, war clubs, and ceremonial masks, and they formally requested their return. Which brings us to today. The returned items are expected to go to the Canadian Museum of History, where experts and Indigenous nations will work together to identify their precise origins and determine where they belong. For Indigenous peoples, these objects are not simply artifacts. They are cultural ancestors. As one leader put it, these cultural ancestors can now rejoin our communities to help ensure the continuity and revitalization of our cultural practices. The return of our cultural ancestors matters. But let me make this clear. This wasn't generosity. This was the result of decades of Indigenous resistance, survival, and insistence that stolen culture must be returned. Their return is a step toward healing, but justice doesn't end with apologies. It ends when Indigenous peoples have full authority over our cultures, our land, and our histories. Thank you for watching. I really enjoyed researching this story. I hope it gave you something new to think about. If you appreciate content like this, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one.